Hello, Tubby and Coos fans. It is me, Candace, coming at you for our Wednesday night board game demo. I am really excited today to demo one of my favorite two-player games to you. I know a lot of you are caught in your house during this quarantine, and you might not have a big group of people to play with. So today I'm going to demo a two-player game, one of, I think, the best two-player games out there. It is called Patchwork. So Patchwork is a game that is from Mayfair Games. The designer is Uwe Rosenberg. And Patchwork is a game for two players. It is a puzzle tile laying game that takes about 30 minutes to play. So let's go over to the table and I will show you how to play Patchwork. So Patchwork, like I said, is a game for two players. This is the setup for the game. And so when you're playing, each player gets their own quilt board, which is what these are. And you start off with 5 buttons apiece. So this, I put the little 5 buttons token out. Of course, there are individual buttons here. So if you want to use the individual buttons, that's fine. I just put the 5 out to represent the 5 that you would start with. So each player gets 5 buttons and a quilt board. Then the rest of the setup is out here on the board. This is your main timer. Here is this board. And each player, of course, there's a green player and a yellow player. Each player gets their own token on the time board. And then you set up all of the patches, which is what these are, around the board in a circle or an oval, whatever works the best. So all of these patches go around the board in a circle. And so the goal of this game is to be the first person to completely fill your 9x9 quilt board with patches. You want to fill that up, and you also want to be the person with the most buttons at the end of the game. The person with the most buttons at the end wins the game. And so the other thing to note about this game is that when you're moving, you don't take turns. Whoever is out in back is the one whose turn it is. So just as an FYI, the person who is second on the board, so in this case, the first player can be whoever. I think it says the last person to hold a needle is the first person to go. So whoever you want to go first at the very beginning is fine. But once that happens, the player whose time token, which is what these are called, is the furthest behind on the board, is who takes the turn. So it is possible for one player to get multiple turns in a row until they jump in forward in front of another player. So if both time tokens are on the same space like this, whoever is on top would go first. And I'll explain how that comes into play in just a minute. So on your turn, there are 2 things that you can do. The first thing would be to advance and receive buttons. So this would be a way to get more buttons. Buttons allow you to pay for patches. So if we come over here and look at some of these patches, or look at one of the patches, so this patch, if you wanted it, would cost 4 buttons to buy, and it would allow you to move 2 spaces on the board. And so that's what that is. And then it'll be worth 1 button when you get button income, which we'll go over in a minute. But that's what a patch looks like. So buttons allow you to buy patches. In order to get buttons, one of the things you can do on your turn is advance on the board and receive buttons. When you do that, you move your time token on the board so that it goes to the space directly in front of your opponent. So for example, if yellow was here on the board, it's green's turn. Green could move and collect buttons. Green would move to the space directly in front of yellow, which is this blue space right here. And then you count the number of spaces that you jumped, and that's how many buttons you get. You get 1 button per space that you moved. So green, in this case, would get 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons. So that is one way to collect buttons on your turn, would be to just move in front of your opponent and collect 1 button for every space. This is really great if your opponent is kind of far ahead of you, and then you could get a lot of buttons. So that is one way to do that. The other thing that you can do on your turn is to, of course, buy a patch and put it on your board. And so if you're going to do that, you can only choose from the 3 patches directly in front of this neutral token. So this token at the beginning of the game, when you set up, you put all of the patches out. This token goes right in front of the 1x2 patch, which is this one. It's 1x2. So the neutral token goes just in front of that. That's how you determine where this goes and where it starts. And then if you want to buy a patch, you can only purchase one of the 3 in front of this neutral token. So say you wanted to purchase this first patch here, you would put the token in its place. You would have to pay 4 buttons to buy this token. So you would turn in your 4 buttons. So I'll turn in my 5 and take 1. You would take this token and you would put it anywhere you want on your board. Now, you can put it in any configuration that you like. So I could put it like this. I could put it like this. I could put it like this if I wanted to. But also determine or think about the fact that you're trying to fill up your whole board. So you want to put it in a configuration that's going to work well for you. And so once you have your patch on the board, the neutral token goes in the place of where that patch was. And so now the next time someone wants to buy, they can choose from those 3. You would then, after you place your patch on the quilt board, you would move your time token. Your time token, again, are these buttons on the board, which is the timer. That's why it's called the time token. So this is the yellow player. So the yellow player would move their time token 2 spaces, which is what it says on this patch. So when you purchase a patch, you pay the certain amount of buttons, you put the patch on your board, and then you move your time token the number of spaces it says. So this says 2. I would move my time token 2 spaces there. If your time token ends up on the same space, so say it would have only been 1, then your token goes on top of the other token, which is important because whoever's on top goes first the next round. So you would get 2 turns in a row if that was the case here. So those are the 2 things you can do on a turn. You can either move to in front of your opponent and take a number of buttons equivalent to the number of spaces you moved, or you can choose to purchase a patch, one of 3 in front of the neutral token, pay the amount of buttons that's on the patch, put it on your board, and then move the number of spaces that the timer says on the patch. Regardless of what action you take, you always move your time token on the board. So either you're advancing to collect buttons or you move your time token based on what the actual patch is telling you. Either way, your time token moves every single turn. Sometimes you will pass special spaces on the board. So in this case of what we just played, my yellow would have ended up here. This is a special space because it has a button on it. As you can see, there are lots of these special spaces with buttons on the board. Whenever you pass a button space, you receive button income. This means you receive a number of buttons according to the patches on your quilt board. So in this case, I have 1 patch on my quilt board. It does have 1 button on it. So when I pass this button space, I would be able to collect 1 button. So that is what's good about these buttons, is if you have patches on your board that have buttons on them. As you can see, some of these patches have buttons on them and some do not. So of course, the patches with buttons on them are better for you to collect, because that means every time you pass a button, you will receive button income for those patches. There are other ways to receive buttons. As I said, you could always just advance and get them, but this is another way. You get button income if you have buttons on your board. The other type of special space is a special patch. So you have these squares on the board. These are all special patches. Once you hit a special patch space, so the first one would be here. Once you hit this special patch space, you actually get to take that patch and put it onto your board. You can put it anywhere on your board, but these patches are the only way that you can get fill single spaces on your board. So if you have a random single space that you need to fill, this is the only way to do it, is to collect these patches on these special spaces on the board. Of course, you're trying to fill up as much of your board as possible, so those patches are really useful for that. The other thing to note is that there's this special 7x7 tile here. So the first player who fills up a 7x7 space on their board. So the boards are 9x9. So the first player who fills up a 7x7 space successfully gets this, and it gives you 7 buttons. So you would take this, and at the end of the game, you get to count 7 extra buttons. So buttons are how you win the game. So of course, this is a really great thing to have. It gives you a bonus for being the first person to complete a 7x7 square on your board. So this game ends after both time tokens reach the end. So you're going to go around in a circle here. Once both time tokens reach this middle square, the game ends. You count up all of your buttons. And so to determine the amount of buttons, you look at, of course, the amount of buttons you have. You add the buttons from the special tile if you have it. And another thing to note is that you have to subtract 2 buttons for every empty space on your board. So if you don't fill your board up by the end of the game, you lose 2 buttons for every empty space. So just keep that in mind as well. Clearly, you want to fill up your whole board so that you don't have to lose any buttons. But if you don't, you lose 2 buttons for every empty space. So you add them all up, lose 2 for every empty space, and whoever has the most buttons wins. If there is a tie, as far as the number of buttons you have, then the player who got to the final space of the time board first wins the game. So that is Patchwork. It is a pretty simple game. Another cool thing about it that I want to show y'all is that this board actually has the time board has 2 sides. So this side is square. The other side is a spiral. So there are 2 different time boards that you can play on with different configurations as far as buttons and patches go. Of course, every single time you play, the way that these patches come out is different. So you get that different every single time. So it's not the same configuration every time. And of course, the way that you're putting patches on your board is different every time. So I think this game has a lot of replayability. I think it's really simple to learn and it's pretty quick to play. So it's one of those games that once you play it, you definitely want to play it a couple of times. It's not a game that you play just once and are done with it. So this is Patchwork. It is one of my favorite 2-player games. When I tell people about it, and I tell them that the theme is quilting, a lot of people are like, I don't know about that. Quilting is not necessarily a hobby for a lot of board gamers, although it is for some of you. Even if you're not into quilting, as you can see, this game is still fun. It's a puzzle game. It's essentially Tetris. So if you like that kind of thing, the quilt theme doesn't have to matter for you. You're just trying to collect buttons and fill up your Tetris board as best as you can. So if you like puzzle games, if you like Tetris, if you like 2-player games that don't take an outrageously long time to play but are still fun, Patchwork, I think, is a really, really great game for you. I'm going to put myself back on the screen here so that I can say thank you. So thank you to everyone for watching our game demos. Again, today I talked about Patchwork. Patchwork is a puzzle tile laying game that takes about 30 minutes to play. It is a specific 2-player game from Mayfair Games, and it is really fun. Even if you don't like quilting, it's essentially Tetris. So I think this is a fun game. Hopefully you enjoyed what you saw as well. Of course, you can purchase any game that you want from us by emailing us. So email us at orders@tubbyandcoos.com to purchase any of the games you see here on our book stream. We can get those in for you. And again, hopefully you really like this. It's a really good 2-player game for quarantine. Again, the name is Patchwork. Email us at orders@tubbyandcoos.com if you want to order. And of course, I will be here every Wednesday at 6 p.m. teaching you how to play board games. So I will see y'all next Wednesday. Thank you for watching.